I once watched my friend completely dismantle her deceitful roommate's life with just 3 screenshots and flawless timing. I was staying on Gia's couch when I witnessed her take down her roommate Bailey in a way I'll never forget. Gia was the type who couldn't refuse anyone, even when it was clearly hurting her. She worked double shifts as a nurse at the hospital, while Bailey claimed to be working in marketing from home. But most afternoons, I'd see Bailey lounging in pajamas, binging Netflix. When September rolled around, Bailey came to Gia in tears, saying she'd been laid off and couldn't pay rent. Gia, without hesitation, offered to cover Bailey's half, until she found a new job, even though she was already living on ramen most nights to save money. I live in the next state, but whenever I'm in town, I crash on Gia's couch and always pay her a little rent for the trouble. Meanwhile, her actual roommate wasn't paying a cent. The first month, Gia paid the full rent and even bought extra groceries so Bailey wouldn't have to worry about food while job hunting. The second month, Bailey insisted she was close to landing a new job and just needed a bit more time. Gia picked up extra night shifts, pushing herself so hard she once fell asleep standing in the kitchen. By the third month, Gia's car started making a terrible grinding noise. Her brakes were shot. Still, she handed over Bailey's rent because Bailey swore she was waiting to hear back from final interviews. Finally, Gia mustered the courage to ask Bailey for just 1 month's rent back, enough to fix her car before it became undrivable. She explained how she'd been walking to work, in the rain, too scared to drive with bad brakes and only needed enough for the repair. Not even the full 3 months Bailey owed. Bailey put on a dramatic show, claiming she was devastated she couldn't help, talking about the brutal job market and how she was already borrowing from her parents just to get by. That night, I was on the couch when Bailey's boyfriend, Craig, came over. Bailey, wearing a brand new designer jacket I'd never seen, told him how guilty she felt about Gia's car. Craig even offered to loan Gia the money, but Bailey quickly shut that down, saying they shouldn't enable Gia's poor financial planning. I wanted to throw something at her. 3 days later, Gia's car died on the highway and had to be towed back to the apartment complex, where it sat as a constant reminder of Bailey's selfishness. Gia was now taking 2 buses to get to her, 12-hour hospital shifts, adding 3 hours to her daily commute, while Bailey was supposedly doing virtual interviews from her room. I started noticing expensive packages arriving for Bailey almost every day, which she'd rush to grab before Gia got home. One afternoon, I was working in the living room when Bailey left her door open during what she claimed was a yoga class. I overheard her on a work call, discussing project deadlines and complaining about her workload at the company she'd supposedly been fired from 3 months ago. I immediately texted Gia about what I'd heard. That night, Gia came home with a look I'd never seen before. Her exhaustion had turned into pure resolve. She didn't confront Bailey directly. Instead, she asked to borrow Bailey's laptop to print some medical forms since her own printer was broken. Bailey, distracted by her phone, handed it over without a second thought. Gia found Bailey's work email still logged in, with hundreds of messages about ongoing projects dating back through all 3 months of her supposed unemployment. Even worse, Bailey's banking app was open, showing regular direct deposits from her employer and Venmo payments to someone named Mark almost daily. Gia took screenshots of everything, including a transaction labeled "Miss You Baby," with heart emojis sent to Mark just 2 days earlier, and forwarded them to herself before calmly returning the laptop. Gia sat next to me on the couch, composing a text to Craig while Bailey was in the shower, singing without a care. She attached the screenshots of Bailey's employment emails, the direct deposits, and the Venmo transactions to Mark, Bailey's ex, whom she'd supposedly cut off after Craig caught them texting last year. Gia's message read, "Bailey's been working this whole time and using the money you think she needs for rent to pay her ex Mark for what looks like more than just friendship." She hovered over the send button, and as she pressed it, we heard Craig's phone ding from Bailey's bedroom. There was a moment of silence, then Craig's voice erupted from Bailey's room, demanding to know who Mark was and why she'd been sending him money for months. The shower singing stopped abruptly, and the water shut off so fast the pipes rattled. $300 last week with hearts and "Miss You Baby." His voice cracked, and I could hear him pacing. Bailey burst out of the bathroom in a towel, dripping, water everywhere, rushing to Craig. "Mark is just a friend who needed help with rent. I swear he was going to be homeless." Her voice had that high-pitched panic I recognized from when she'd told Gia about losing her job. Craig stood there, scrolling through months of Venmo transactions, his face getting redder with each swipe. Help with rent doesn't need heart. Emojis, Bailey. Or can't wait to see you. Or last night was amazing. He shoved the phone in her face, showing screenshot after screenshot. And what's this about you discussing project deadlines at the job that supposedly fired you 3 months ago? Bailey tried to grab the phone, but Craig held it out of reach. That's when Bailey started crying, but it was the fake, calculated, kind. Okay, I kept my job, but I was too ashamed to admit I lied about being fired. My mom is sick, she needs help with medical bills, and I didn't know how to ask for help. She covered her face, peeking through her fingers to see if Craig was buying it. Craig wasn't even looking at her anymore, just reading from her work emails. Subject: Cabo plans for next month. Can't wait to lay on the beach with a margarita, while these suckers are stuck in the office. His voice was flat now, which was somehow worse than yelling. Gia was eating ramen every night to cover your rent while you were planning beach vacations. Bailey's towel was slipping, and she had to grab it with one hand while reaching for Craig with the other. Someone hacked my laptop. They must have gotten into my email. But Craig just shook his head. I know your password, Bailey. Remember? You let me use your computer last week to print concert tickets. The Venmo history went back further than their relationship, showing payments to Mark from before Bailey even moved in with Gia. Craig's voice dropped to a whisper, and Gia and I had to lean forward to hear. Were you ever really with me? Or was I just someone to take to restaurants while you sent the money to him? Bailey opened her mouth, but no sound came out, just a gasping like a fish out of water. Craig stormed out, grabbing his overnight bag from Bailey's closet. Bailey chased after him, her towel barely staying on, water dripping onto the carpet. Craig, please let me explain. It's not what it looks like. But he was already at the door, yanking it open so hard it bounced off the wall. Lose my number, Bailey. We're done. He slammed the door so hard Gia's nursing certificates shook, and one even fell, the glass cracking on the floor. Bailey stood there, dripping, and shaking, then spun to face us on the couch, her face twisted in anger. You went through my laptop. That's invasion of privacy. That's illegal. Gia didn't even look up from her phone, just kept scrolling. You handed it to me yourself and left everything logged in. That's not hacking. That's just careless. Bailey took a step toward us, but slipped on the water she'd dripped everywhere and had to catch herself on the wall. Gia finally looked up, completely calm. You have 30 days to pay back 3 months of rent plus utilities. That's $4,200. If you don't, I'm taking you to small claims court, and I have all the evidence I need. Bailey laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. Gia turned her phone around, showing the small claims court website. Lawyers aren't even allowed in small claims court, Bailey. I wondered what Bailey's real plan was. Working the whole time while watching her roommate struggle with broken brakes and 3-hour bus rides? The fact that she had Mark in the picture before Craig even entered the scene made me question everything. It'll just be you, me, and a judge looking at these screenshots, Gia said. Bailey waved her phone like she might throw it. I'll call the police. Identity theft, hacking, you'll go to jail. But her hand was shaking, so badly she almost dropped it. Gia pulled up more screenshots she hadn't even sent to Craig yet. Here's your Instagram from last week, wearing a new Michael Kors bag while telling me you couldn't afford groceries. Here's your LinkedIn, showing you as currently employed. Here are your Uber receipts from nights you borrowed bus money from me. Each image made Bailey step back until she was pressed against the wall, her towel barely hanging on. Lying about employment to avoid paying rent is fraud, Bailey. Who do you think the police will arrest? Bailey's phone started buzzing, nonstop with notifications. She looked down, her face going white. Craig had already told their mutual friends everything, and her social media was blowing up. You're a con artist. I can't believe you did this to Craig. Gia should sue you for everything. She tried to type responses, but her hands were shaking too much, and mascara was running down her face in black streaks, even though she hadn't worn any in the shower. Then Mark texted her, and I could see it from where I sat because her font was huge. Why is Craig sending me screenshots and calling me a homewrecker? My girlfriend saw everything and she's packing her stuff. What did you do? Bailey tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. Her breathing sped up until she was nearly hyperventilating. Without another word, Bailey ran to her room, and we heard drawers slamming, hangers hitting the floor, things being thrown into bags. I need to get out of here before this gets worse, she muttered loudly enough for us to hear. Mark will let me stay. He has to. He loves me. Gia and I stayed on the couch, and for the first time in months, I saw Gia smile. A small, genuine smile. Bailey came out with just a duffel bag and her car keys, her hair still wet and frizzing. I'll be back for my stuff when you've both calmed down and realized how insane you're being. She tried to slam the door, but it bounced back open. We heard her car start and peel out of the lot, and the apartment felt like someone had finally opened a window after months of suffocating. Within an hour, Gia's phone was blowing up. Craig had posted the screenshots everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, tagging all their mutual friends, Bailey's co-workers, even her cousin who worked at the hospital. The comments poured in, each more brutal than the last. By the next morning, someone had forwarded Craig's post to Bailey's company's HR department, asking if they knew their employee was committing fraud. Bailey didn't know yet, since she'd turned off her phone to avoid the social media disaster, but her professional life was about to implode, just like her personal one. Gia left early for a shift, but her laptop was open on the coffee table, and I saw an email from someone at Bailey's company asking if Gia wanted to provide a statement about the fraud. HR tried calling Bailey for an emergency meeting, but her phone was still off. They sent emails, texts, even called her emergency contact, still listed as Craig, who told them exactly where to find her. The emails got more urgent. Please respond immediately. Your presence is required by noon. Failure to appear will be considered job abandonment. Bailey finally turned her phone back on around 11 how, and it exploded with notifications. Missed calls from work, her parents, and numbers she didn't recognize. She tried calling HR, but they insisted she come in person immediately. No exceptions. Could hear the panic in her voice when she called Mark, begging to stay at his place for a few hours after her meeting. Mark came home for lunch to find Bailey on his couch, still in yesterday's clothes, mascara smeared. What are you doing here? How did you even get in? His voice was cold, nothing like the flirty Venmo messages. Bailey tried to explain about Craig and the screenshots, but Mark cut her off. Is it true? Were you lying about being unemployed while I was sending you money thinking you needed help? Bailey's silence told him everything. Mark's face went from confused to furious. My girlfriend saw those screenshots. She's at her sister's, deciding if she's leaving me because of you. Because I was stupid enough to believe you. Needed help. He grabbed Bailey's arm, not hard but firmly, and walked her to the door. You need to leave now. She's coming over in an hour, and if she finds you here, it's over for me. Bailey begged, saying she had nowhere else to go, but Mark just pushed her out and locked the door. I know because Bailey accidentally called Gia's phone while trying to reach her parents, and we heard the whole thing on speaker before she realized, and hung up. Bailey's parents called Gia's apartment 20 minutes later, and I answered because Gia was in the shower. Her mom's voice was trembling. Craig contacted us on Facebook. He sent us evidence. Is it true? Has Bailey been lying? About losing her job? I told her to ask Bailey herself, and her mom started crying. She won't answer our calls. We're driving down now. We'll be there by tonight. I went with Gia to the courthouse the next day to file the small claims paperwork. She'd printed everything at the hospital, screenshots, bank records, texts, all organized in a folder. The clerk's eyes widened as she flipped through it. This is very thorough, she said, stamping each page. The filing fee was $80, and I paid it because Gia's account was still recovering from months of double rent. Bailey showed up at the HR meeting that afternoon, looking like she hadn't slept, wearing the same clothes as the day before. They already had everything printed out. The social media posts, evidence of her lying about working from home, what they called time theft. The HR manager told her she was being terminated immediately for violating company policy on honesty and integrity. Security stood by her desk as she packed her things, her coworkers watching from their cubicles. That evening, Bailey came back to the apartment, pounding on the door, begging Gia to drop the lawsuit. Please, I've lost everything. My job, Craig. Mark won't even talk to me. Isn't that enough? Gia spoke through the closed door, not even bothering with the chain. You made your choices for 3 months while I ate ramen and walked to work. Now you can live with them. Bailey kept pounding, screaming that Gia had ruined her life over money that didn't even matter. Insurance would have covered it if you'd been patient, but Gia just turned up the TV until Bailey's voice was drowned out. Eventually, we heard footsteps and a car door slam. The landlord called the next morning. He'd seen the social media posts and wanted to know the truth about Bailey's employment. When Gia confirmed Bailey had been lying about paying rent while employed, he said that was a lease violation and fraud. I'm starting eviction proceedings immediately. I don't want tenants like that in my building. Gia tried to say Bailey was leaving anyway, but he said he needed it on record for legal reasons. Bailey's credit card started getting declined everywhere because Craig had called the companies to remove himself as an authorized user. The accounts were frozen pending investigation of the fraud claims. Bailey tried to buy gas and had to leave her car at the pump, walking away in shame while other customers stared. Someone who knew her from Craig's post took a picture and posted it online with "Karma's A" as the caption. Bailey's parents arrived that evening with a U-Haul, ready to pack up her life. Her mom knocked on our door, apologizing to Gia with tears streaming down her face. We didn't raise her to be like this. I don't know where we went wrong. Her dad just loaded boxes in silence while Bailey sat in their car, too ashamed or angry to face us. The neighbors came out to watch, everyone knowing exactly why Bailey was leaving. Someone had even printed out Craig's Facebook post and taped it to the mailboxes. Bailey's parents worked quickly, throwing things in boxes without organizing, just wanting to get out. Within 2 hours, everything Bailey owned was in the truck, and they drove away. Bailey in the back seat like a grounded teenager. A few days later, I was making breakfast when I heard a thud from the kitchen. Gia had collapsed, dropping like a puppet with its strings cut. I barely caught her head before it hit the tile. She was limp, her skin gray, breathing shallow. My hands shook as I called 911, trying to remember what to do while begging her to wake up. The paramedics arrived quickly, but it felt like forever. They said it was severe exhaustion and dehydration. Her body had just shut down from months of stress and overwork. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, one said he'd seen this before in nurses who worked too many doubles. The body can only take so much before it says enough. Bailey's life unraveled faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Job, boyfriend, side guy, parents, home, all gone because she thought a few fake screenshots could outdo Gia's real folder of proof. I rode in the ambulance, holding Gia's hand while she drifted in and out, mumbling about needing to get to work. The paramedic told her work could wait. She needed to rest. At the hospital, a nurse named Anita Graham recognized Gia immediately. "Oh, honey, what happened to you?" She took over Gia's care, making sure she got a private room even though the ER was packed. Anita hooked up the IV herself, talking softly to Gia about needing to take care of herself. "I heard what happened with your roommate," she said. "That kind of betrayal takes a physical toll. Your body's been in fight mode for months." She stayed past her shift to make sure Gia was stable, bringing real food from the cafeteria instead of the standard patient meals. That evening, Gia finally spoke clearly, her voice small. Was destroying Bailey worth ending up here? Am I just as toxic as she was? She looked so small in that hospital bed, like all the fight had drained out of her. I told her she did what she had to do to survive, but we both knew that wasn't really an answer. Anita came back with dinner, sitting on the edge of Gia's bed like an old friend. "I had a roommate in nursing school who stole my rent money for 3 months. I found out when we got evicted. I didn't fight back like you did. I just let it happen. And you know what? I still regret not standing up for myself. What you did wasn't toxic. It was necessary." The next morning, Gia was more alert, but seemed emptier. "I thought revenge would make me feel powerful," she said, picking at her hospital bracelet. "But I just feel exhausted and mean, like I became someone I don't recognize." Anita, who'd come in early, sat down with her coffee and listened. "That's normal," Anita said. "Standing up for yourself after being a doormat feels wrong at first. Your brain's not used to you having boundaries, but that doesn't mean you did anything wrong." Bailey chose to lie. You just chose to stop enabling her. She made it sound simple, but I could see Gia struggling to believe it. A court summons arrived at the hospital that afternoon for the small claims hearing, in 2 weeks. Anita read it out loud since Gia's hands were still shaky. You should see this through, Anita said. Not for revenge, but for closure and for the money. You're going to have medical bills from this. Gia stared at the ceiling for a long time before deciding, I'll go. Not because I want to hurt her more, but because I need that. Money. My car is fixed, but now I have hospital bills. She created this situation. She signed the papers with a steady hand. No anger, just tired determination. 2 weeks later, we sat in small claims court on those uncomfortable benches. The judge reviewed all the evidence Gia had submitted, screenshots, bank records, texts. Bailey's chair at the defendant's table stayed empty. The judge looked at it, then at Gia, his expression hardening as he read. Missy Thompson has been properly served and chose not to appear, he said, adjusting his glasses. In 15 years on this bench, this is one of the clearest cases of roommate fraud I've seen. He held up the Venmo screenshots, shaking his head at the heart emojis and messages. Default judgment for the plaintiff in the full amount requested, plus court costs. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived with a check from Bailey's parents for the full judgment. The note from her mother was brief. Please accept this payment in full. We ask only that you not pursue wage garnishment against our daughter. We are deeply sorry. Gia deposited it immediately, watching her account finally show something other than near zero. With the money, Gia got her car fully serviced. Not just the brakes, but everything the mechanic had warned her about for months. He told her she was lucky she hadn't crashed driving it in that condition. She sat in the driver's seat afterward, testing the brakes at every light, learning to trust the car again, like she was learning to trust herself. Isabel Cheney moved in as the new roommate 3 weeks after Bailey left. Anita had recommended her from the hospital, someone reliable with pay stubs and references. Isabel set up automatic rent payments before moving in, saying she didn't want any confusion about money. She bought her own groceries and labeled them, respecting the boundaries Gia had set. The apartment slowly transformed with Isabel's presence. She brought plants that filled the windows, making the space feel alive again. She and Gia developed a respectful routine, morning coffee together, but no forced conversation, each respecting the other's space. When Isabel asked to borrow milk one morning, Gia hesitated for a second before saying yes. Isabel noticed and immediately offered to Venmo payment, but Gia shook her head. It's just milk, but thanks for asking first. 3 months later, Craig texted Gia from an unknown number. Thank you for showing me the truth. I'm in therapy now, dealing with trust issues, but you saved me from marrying her. I heard she moved to Colorado with her parents. Gia read it twice, then simply replied, You're welcome, before deleting the thread. Anita started inviting Gia out with other nurses after shifts. Gia went, but left early at first, still learning how to be around people without giving too much of herself. But slowly she started staying longer, even laughing at stories about difficult patients. The walls she'd built were still there, but now they had doors. When I visited 6 months later, the apartment felt different. Isabel's plants everywhere, Anita cooking dinner, Gia actually laughing at something on TV. Not the exhausted, empty Gia from before Bailey, and not the cold, vengeful Gia from during the fallout. Someone new, someone who'd learned to protect herself without shutting down completely. Isabel mentioned seeing Bailey's LinkedIn, showing her in Colorado seeking opportunities. Someone had commented, asking if she was the same Bailey from the viral roommate fraud post. Gia just nodded and changed the subject. That chapter was closed. The apartment had become something sustainable. Isabel paid rent without drama. Anita brought friendship without obligation. The plants cleaned the air and made everything feel fresh. Gia had been promoted at work, making enough that she didn't need a roommate anymore, but she kept Isabel anyway. It's nice having someone around who doesn't need anything from me, she said. That evening, Gia made dinner for all of us. Just spaghetti with jarred sauce, nothing fancy, but she was humming while she cooked. It was the first time I'd heard her hum since before Bailey's lies began. The sound was quiet, but it filled the kitchen like proof that she was healing. Before I left the next morning, Gia hugged me properly, not the stiff, quick hugs from before, but a real one. "Thank you for staying through all of it," she whispered, "even when I went dark." I hugged her back, feeling how much healthier she was, no longer just bones and exhaustion. "That's what friends do," I said, and felt her nod against my shoulder. We were different now. All of us changed by what happened, but we were okay. Different, but okay. Thanks for letting me walk through all of this with you. I really loved exploring these moments together. Until next time, like the video, it helps more than you think.